Hello there, everyone, and welcome back to Psyched to be with you. With me, your host, Christopher Leach, aka Chimp195. I've got an absolute swashbuckling episode lined up for you today with another fantastic guest. Episode 11, penultimate episode of season 3. I've been doing it that long now. Here we are. Let's just get stuck in. I'm buzzing. I hope you're buzzing. Let's do it. My very special guest, if you could please introduce yourself and tell us who you are and what you do.
Hi everyone, my name is Hannah Slag. I am a postdoc in student loneliness at King's College London. So in a lot of my research, I tend to specialise in psychometric scale development, although my background is in experimental psychology and agency research, and I'm also a very keen science communicator, hence why I'm here.
So there is loads for us to delve into, to unpack, to devour during this episode. So I'm conscious to get started. So let's go straight from the top. Postdoc, for those that don't know, means postdoctoral or postdoctorate, one of those. So it means you are PhD, presumably.
Yeah, that's correct. Got my PhD in May was my viva, although I like to forget it.
Okay, so take us through your journey then, because obviously, like, agency research, loneliness, my psychology brain can see how that kind of works out. But take us back to the start. What got you into this? How did you get to where you are now?
Yeah, to the very beginning. So my PhD, as I said, was in agency research. So I was doing online experiments, so behavioral experiments with teenagers. So for those who don't know, agency, or rather your sense of agency, is your awareness of your control over your actions and the consequences of those actions. And I was looking at it at a very basic level. So for example, when you turn on a light switch, you then start looking at the light bulb and you expect the light bulb to turn on. When it does eventually turn on, you then know it turned on because you clicked the light switch. So it's that causal effect relationship and your knowledge that you are the one that made it happen. So I was looking at how that develops in teenagers because it was an area that hadn't really been looked at before. A lot of the time in developmental psychology, we spend a lot of time focusing on children and then adults. And we kind of assume that one day they just kind of wake up and suddenly the child has become an adult. A lot of the time we kind of forget the bit in the middle. So that's where my research came in. So I was mainly looking at agency at quite this basic sensory level, as I said. So whether the brain recognizes that it's made an action and a consequence has arisen from that action. But you can take it a step further and think about a more higher order level of agency. And that's where, for example, if the light bulb didn't turn on, your brain might then start to theorize why that might be the case. So is the light bulb broken? Did I click the wrong switch? Am I capable of turning on a light switch in this example?
It depends on the day, am I right? Like,
yeah. Yeah, definitely. But it can also be more like, I don't know, personality, like even higher level questions, like, do I have the power to go to university if I want to? Do I have the agency to do those things? Am I in control of my life and the actions that I choose to make and what happens to me? And that's kind of where things intersected with well-being, because if you have a lack of agency, then that can lead to feelings of helplessness, which was where you get feelings of depression and all that jazz. So alongside my PhD, I also had the pleasure of volunteering as a what was my title? A peer supporter for Student Minds. So I ran peer support groups, which was amazing. I thoroughly enjoyed it. But essentially, these peer support groups were for students who experienced anxiety and low mood. And I got to meet a lot of different students and also see the variety of challenges that students come across just through going throughout their course. And that kind of turned on my interest to student research and also kind of what inspired me to pursue this for a postdoc. And I would like to return to agency research because I think when students are starting their course, often they're moving to a completely new city and they're exploring what can they do on their own. So this might be their first time kind of outside of their family home, away from their parents. So I think there's definitely a crossover. And more generally, I've always been interested in mental health and well-being research. So it's kind of a roundabout way of how I ended up here.
I mean, wow. I mean, agency is something I find fascinating. It's so philosophical. You know, because I feel like listeners will have had you enter a room, you flick on a light switch, it doesn't come on. You flick it again, and like just that thought process of all the things that your brain will come up with to try and essentially rationalize. Like, can I turn a light switch on? Is so beautifully existential, which is what I love about that. So that's, I mean, kudos for researching that, because I mean that's a philosophical quagmire. Like, were you asked? I don't want to bring up any unpleasant memories, but was there not a point in your life where you're like, so what if like free will doesn't exist though? What if you don't have agency?
Yeah, it can get like when I used to go to like conferences or speak to other PhD students, it can get very deep very quick. And I used to kind of, because there are these two levels to agency. So I mentioned that I looked at like the lower level, like does the brain actually register the sensory signals coming in, like the light signals from the light bulb? And then there's that higher order sense where your brain starts trying to rationalize things. I kind of give a bit of a cop-out answer every time, you know, and I think you're allowed to when you're still a PhD student, of saying like, no, I look at the lower level. Like, I'm leaving the rest for the philosophers to kind of, you know, sit around and talk about. Like, I'm interested in the brain. But yeah, definitely. I think it does link to those interesting, deep questions.
And it creates quite a nice a synergy with the kind of work I'm doing, which is on student sort of mental health and video games. But I'm sort of very interested in, or almost agency, I think could feed into it, because I'm interested in the choices people make and why they make them within a game's context, right? And what might influence those type of things. So there's a really neat overlap because obviously I've done no official findings, asterisks, quotation marks, legal protection. But when people start playing a game, they seem to very much think that they're on a linear path, right? Even when they have choices, they feel like they might be inconsequential, and like that feeling very much affects agency. People go, "Ah, I didn't matter, so I just started clicking through to get to the end of the game." And you might be like, "Okay, but your choices did matter," and they go, "What?" And are quite dismayed at that. So yeah, I'm colour me invested. I'm interested. I want to peel back the onion a little bit further though. What got you into psychology? What was your undergraduate in? Like, because everyone has that really cute, fun story of the moment I was inspired. What's yours?
Yeah, well, if we want the moment I was inspired, we need to go back a bit further. So actually, this sounds a little bit crazy, but when I was in high school, you know, like we were asking each other, what do you want to be? And I already straight out the gate was like, I want a doctorate in psychology. I want to be doctor of psychology. Like, I'd already got my PhD in my head. Like, I knew I wanted to be like researching, probably something related to mental health. And I kind of got there in the end in a roundabout way. But when people ask me why, I always said it was because, you know, every thought and feeling that we're kind of having is at least some level linked to whatever neurons are firing off in our heads and whatever's happening up there. Being a lot older and wiser, I know that there's a lot more to the story, but that was the basic idea that kind of set me down that path. And then I had like amazing A-level teachers as well for psychology, which inspired me further. And then, yep, so my undergrad was in psychology and cognitive neuroscience, which sounds very fancy, but it was just psychology with a bit of brain stuff added in.
Just a bit of brain stuff, casual.
Yeah, casual. Yeah, and I really enjoyed that. I had an amazing personal tutor, Emma. She was amazing and really helps to inspire me, honestly, to become an academic, because I'd already, as I said, decided that this was the path that I wanted to go down. But I mean, there's a big time difference between actually like being in high school and then applying for a PhD and kind of starting the academic journey into like being a researcher. So I could have shifted from that anytime, but I think seeing academics like Emma really kept me on that path, because I honestly thought to myself, I want to be somebody's Emma one day. So she was my personal tutor and she was always very supportive. And honestly, just like a rock to come back to, like when things got really, really stressful. It was nice to, have someone kind of on your side. So yeah, I just decided that that was the kind of academic that I wanted to be, someone fighting in the student's corner. And now I actually am a personal tutor. So I have 8 amazing tutees. And I even emailed Emma like, Emma, I'm a personal tutor now. I'm being you finally. And it was very cute. So
This
I
is
suppose all of that together.
this is perhaps a spicy question, and I apologize for that. But like, did the reality live up to the dream, especially with the kind of turmoil academia as an industry finds itself in, with the numerous strikes over the past few years and things like this? I'm especially interested as someone who has transitioned from PhD to postdoc.
Mhm.
Given the, in my opinion, rough treatment of PhD researchers.
Yeah. If you'd asked me during my PhD research when I was like, in the thick of it, maybe you would have got a different answer. Especially when COVID hit, because that was a rough time for sure. Um, but nowadays, especially with starting the postdoc, I think yes, because you get asked what would you do if you could do anything else. And I think I would honestly still be on this path. Um, I think any job that you have will have its downsides, uh, apart from maybe like video game tester or like person that runs like
I
a
I know
cat cafe
I
or
know
something.
several people who work in QA that will tell you that it's not fun.
Yeah, well, see, that's the thing then. That proves the point. Any job that you have will have downsides. I mean, academia certainly does, but I think I've always been a person that I recognized that I had like skills in like mathematics and coding. So I'm quite, not to toot my own horn, I'm quite good at computer programming. And I thought if I have these skills, I'd rather put them to good use rather than go and work in a business, kind of helping a company improve their profit margins and stuff. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but you know, I I want to help people where I can, honestly.
No one
Like,
tell Dr. Slack that universities are businesses. Controversial opinion. It's
well,
a joke. I apologize. We
yeah.
like you're Dr. Slack's now sitting there going, "Why did I agree to do this show? He's now turned evil." Like, all in jest. All in jest.
Mhm.
I'm kind of interested to touch on the mental health stuff, just again out of interest, and apologies if this sounds like an adversarial question, but one of the things that I frequently sort of face within the research is the kind of nuance of evidence. Now, I firmly sort of put myself on the social sort of continuum side of things in relation to impacts to mental health, but being more neuroscience in your own experience, where do you sit on the medical versus social kind of debate?
Yeah, excellent question. So, well, I've kind of posed myself as a neuroscientist now, and that was true up until very recently. So, like when I started my undergrad, I remember kind of almost turning my nose up at social psychology because, it's not the brain, it's not fun. But as I say, being more older and wiser, I'm now realizing that, our mental health and even us as individuals don't exist in a vacuum. We interact with other people and more important, well, equally as important, the systems that we find ourselves in. So the way that society is structured, but also the kind of institutions and services that we have access to, and the different ways that we may or may not have access to those different things. And all of that is kind of like the way that society affects us. So I would say it is both. And also, there is something to be said about social approaches to mental health support. So I mentioned that I'd previously volunteered as a peer mentor for Student Minds. And that isn't something that students would, go through the medical system, like go through the NHS to be prescribed to. That's something that they could just come to themselves. And it was just a space for them to meet with other students and just talk about their experiences. And I think there's something to be said for those kind of low-level social approaches. Because I think the medical model can often shift a lot of the blame onto the individual and say, well, this is something that you have to sort out because it's a problem with you. And it kind of ignores that it might be something to do with the kind of wider social and systematic issues that are impacting on that person. So yeah, I think we need to think about how we can help the kind of system around the person as well. That was a kind of roundabout answer, but I hope there was
I'm
an
being
answer
incredibly
in
cheeky. I can only apologise. I also would like to declare for listeners' benefit that you are sitting there with your beautiful branded university background on, and things like
there. Maybe
that.
you should have turned that off.
So well answered. As I say, for just out of interest. I mean not to trip you up or anything.
No, it's an interesting question.
I'm also interested in sort of like, is there anything that sort of you're working on presently that you can sort of tell us about, or any other sort of pieces of work that you'd like to note just while we're chatting?
Yeah, definitely. So, as I mentioned, I am a postdoc at King's College London, and more specifically, I am working on a research project called You Belong. So at You Belong, we are interested in social connection, sense of belonging, and loneliness in first year undergraduate students as they're making this transition from high school to university. And at the minute, we're actually running a longitudinal survey that aims to kind of look at what kind of factors in the student's life might be impacting on the rate to which they feel loneliness and how the influence of those factors might change over time. So it's a longitudinal survey. It has 2 different time points for data collection. The first being now, so around September and October when we're filming this. And so that's when they haven't really had much university education to kind of inform any expectations that they might have around making friends and how they're going to feel about university. And then the second time point is going to be in January and February. So after they've had a full semester to find out what university is all about and experience whatever that might be. And yeah, then we're going to compare how changes in these different variables might have affected the rate at which they feel loneliness, but also a sense of belonging at university. And yeah, and ultimately our goal is to inform university leaders, but also other researchers, so that we can create more positive social experiences for students and ultimately create a community where they can all feel like they belong at university.
I mean, I can put my
That's a kind of business pitch.
I can put my old outreach hat on and sort of, I was nodding along there. We know that belonging and community is very important for things like retention, keeping students at university. And if you're doing well, you'll have a better time. You know what I mean. If you feel that you're excited to go to class, you'll go to class, you'll learn more, and sort of the feedback loop repeats, right? Obviously,
yeah, definitely.
in kind of the world of research, it would be great if you could charter them prior to university to then measure a change once they start as well, right? That'd be cool. Um,
Yeah, definitely. So, from my understanding, that is what our principal investigator, or PI, so the head of the project, originally planned. But that's not ultimately what got funded. So, we're doing the next best thing and catching them as soon as they start university. So, yeah, I agree with you. In an ideal world, we would catch them while they're still, thinking about their university options and really starting to think about what university life would be like. But maybe for a future project.
well, I used to work for the National Collaborative Outreach Program, or Uni Connect, as it got rebranded to, and that was charting school age learners through to further education up to the point of higher education. And it was trying to do that much more heavy longitudinal sort of process and look at skills building, aspirations. Because to tie things back, you were talking about agency of like, can I go to university? There are a lot of people, particularly from lower socioeconomic areas or things like this, where they don't feel that they can. And actually, that's a huge barrier
Mhm.
when the system is kind of built in some ways to assist as much as possible to allow people to go to uni. And I would always advocate to go to uni. I feel like I learned a lot about myself as much as my course through that process. I understand it's not needed for every career. Totally respect that. But I think some of the additional skills, the social skills, the general sort of like critical thinking and things like this are really, really important.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm a first gen person, so no one in my family went to uni. Um, but I think, like when I compare myself to like people from my village who didn't go, I think it teaches you a lot about independence. So like we're speaking about agency. It taught me a lot about what I can do on my own because it's quite a unique experience in that not always, because not everyone moves away from their parents for uni, but a lot of people do. And, I think that that is a really great experience because it really makes you, because, you're the one that's kind of organizing all your appointments. If there is a problem, you have to be the one to sort it out. So yeah, it definitely teaches you a lot of additional skills beyond, the bit of paper that you get at the end.
This is like just sort of came to me, but it kind of feeds into like our agency and sort of critical thinking discussion. I kind of I have to give my head a wobble sometimes, and you look at certain things on social media that, and I won't name names, but people are like, are you aware of what the system are doing? The media is telling you things. You should have critical thinking and believe what I say instead. And like anyone with any critical thinking skills will tell you, okay, but if you apply critical thinking, you'll know that they're also telling you utter nonsense. Also, like, like,
Yeah,
like,
that's it.
and like, I feel like if you have the agency to choose what you believe to some degree, like, why would you just like, why believe the first person who's like, wait a minute, don't listen to them, you can trust me. I'm 100% reliable. Now, just please enter your credit card number.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think, university and especially I mean this is probably true in others, but in science we get taught a lot to look at like the credibility of the sources. I mean, it's probably the same in the other faculties as well. But yeah, I think that's definitely one of the most important things that university can teach you. Um, mhm,
I'm just thinking as well. I think obviously you were looking at teenagers as well. I think that's fascinating because especially as you enter that phase of life where you maybe move away from home, but even if you in the UK legally hit 18, you considered an adult, right? So like you
mhm,
then have a lot more agency. Education is very prescriptive up until the point you're 18, right? Like you maybe in college, further education, you'll have a couple of free periods and things like this, but because you are very prescriptive, you don't really have agency. Like when you're in school, you have maybe like
mhm,
2 hours to do what you wanted to do before you went to bed.
mhm.
As a,
Yeah, definitely.
as opposed to like
Yeah,
when you're a PhD, you can work whenever you want basically because there's no one
yeah.
really monitoring that.
Yeah, definitely. And there's quite a bit of literature that's talking about, this time of adolescence where they are offered a lot more choice. And, there's stuff to say that in their decision making, teenagers are actually uniquely suited to reacting to novels and like new information, even much so better than adults who, adults are kind of a bit more stuck in their ways and will react to things similar to how it relates to what they've seen before, kind of stuck in their ways. Whereas the literature says that teenagers are a bit more open to new experiences and a bit more ready to move away from the teachings of their parents. Because even if they don't move to university, it may be that, they've been told one opinion about a certain topic, for example, and this is maybe a time where they're starting to question what do they think and try to form their own identity and where they stand as an individual. Yeah, a very exciting time.
I mean, I wouldn't necessarily want to relive my time as a teenager, if I'm honest. But
Yeah,
like,
same.
definitely, you do really make a lot of growth, and I think, mate, obviously I'm saying this through my own biases, but I feel like the leap that I made as a person, as a human, between the ages of like say 13 to 19 was probably smaller than the stuff that I've done from like 20 to pushing 30 now. I feel like that was a greater
Mm-hmm.
leap, and I feel like a lot of people, because as you know, I'm definitely pro university, but I think like there's still that leap I think you make between 21 and 25, where you maybe like you might
Mm-hmm.
go on to do a master's, you might do a PhD, but like when you get out there and like you have to manage your own bills and like it kind of like there's no safety net, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. It's almost like a second, well, maybe a third transformative period if we're counting like childhood as like maybe the first. Um,
Our
yeah, maybe it's
childhood's
like a
just like
new,
go collect trauma, deal with it later. You know what I mean?
yeah.
That's a joke. That's a joke.
Um, but yeah, so maybe in the future we'll start to think of it as like an additional developmental period, uh, like its own unique kind of window of development or like critical period.
I think that'd be neat. I would enjoy that personally,
Hmm.
but I'm also of the mindset where like I never want to stop growing. I never want to stop learning. I feel like if you reach that point, ignorance is the enemy of intelligence. Do you know what I mean? That's very much
Yeah,
like
definitely.
if you close yourself off to learning new things or hearing different perspectives, you're not helping yourself. I think that's half
Hmm.
of a Nick Cave quote somewhere, but I'm not quite sure.
Yeah, but it's definitely true though. And I think there is a danger as you get older to kind of get settled into a routine, especially as like maybe like you settle down, buy a house, start like a permanent career, maybe. Like I'm speaking as a postdoc on a fixed term contract, like, I can dream, you know. But yeah, I think there is the danger of kind of getting closed off and not really keeping up with what's happening around you. I can definitely see that in some, people in my village, who've lived in the village all their life. And, the world outside the village doesn't really matter as much, because you kind of get settled into your ways. But yeah, I think there's something always good to be said about keeping yourself open to learning new information and seeing things from other people's perspectives that might even shake up your worldview. I think as horrible as the pandemic was, it was quite good for like giving us an opportunity to kind of reflect on where our lives were at and maybe like pick up a new hobby if we wanted to, like reinvent a part of ourselves.
I mean, I always like to cite, and I'm not the first to do so, but from like an equity point of view when speaking about disability, like work from home is very accessible, and these were things that were often
Hmm.
denied disabled people prior to the pandemic, and then suddenly, as soon as it mattered to business, it mattered to everyone, so everyone could work from home, and suddenly work equipment was available, and no one minded, and you're seeing the kind of consequences of forced returns to work and things like that now in sort of 2023, and the kind of pushback, which I think is really quite warranted. So I'm not saying it was a good time, but like it definitely
Hmm.
taught us a lot um, about
Yeah,
life.
so Yeah, for sure. And I guess that's like an example of previously where it was seen as like an individualistic problem, something for the individual to push for and try and sort out. To then look at, okay, well, how actually can we change the system? And oh, suddenly it is possible to, implement these different like hybrid working methods or working from home. You know, there is a way if you look at actually systematic change, it's not all on the individual.
Listen, anyway, we're chatting away. I'm making a just chat about work. This is meant to be a fun podcast. My problem is I get very fascinated by my guests, and I'm just like, tell me more, tell me everything. But what do you like to get up to when you're not working? If at all that is possible. I've had several guests that seemingly don't ever stop working.
Yeah, I mean, definitely postdoc life, it can seem like that sometimes, especially when your project's ongoing and you're kind of in the thick of it. But when I do get a spare moment, I am quite a keen crocheter. So I make a lot of like clothes. I also sew my own clothes as well, so that's always fun. Basically anything kind of like arts and crafts related, I'll probably have a go at. So I've recently picked up painting as well, which I am absolutely terrible at, but I have a fun time, which is what it's all about.
I mean, if you've ever seen the joy of painting, it's not about mistake. We don't make
Yeah, I
mistakes. We
love
have
Bob
happy
Ross.
accidents. You know,
That's true. Honestly, half the time when I'm painting, I just have that on loop in my head, like no mistakes.
it's your world. Do
Yeah.
whatever you want.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so that's what I tend to spend most of my time doing, filling up my wardrobe with clothes that I've made, that I've crocheted or sewn. It's a lot of fun.
Have you got any sort of garments that you're particularly sort of proud of, or even anything like what type of painting have you been doing, like watercolor, oils?
Mhm. Yeah, so I can answer both those questions. I'll start with the painting. So here's a top tip. If you are not good at painting, which I am most definitely not, do abstract painting because then, that little line that you did, it was intentional, it was artistic, it represents a journey. So yeah, I guess I specialize in abstract art, air quotes. And I started with watercolor painting, which I've been told is one of the harder types of painting, but I mean, I quite liked it because everything just blends together and then you can't see that I didn't, paint that line as straight as it could have been. But I've recently got some canvases and tried, acrylic painting and different types of branching out. Mostly because I want to decorate my office a little bit, put up some motivational art, I suppose.
Hmm.
So that's been fun. And then what kind of garments have I made, and are there any that I'm proud of? So I have been making a cardigan for about a year, and like I just keep procrastinating on it and starting new projects, which is the story of my life, honestly. I just get distracted by new things, or I see a new pattern and think, oh, I've got to make that now. But I think the garment that I'm most proud of is one that I actually made in high school. Um, so in high school, so this isn't something that I crocheted because I hadn't discovered crochet at that point. I was still only sewing like on the machine. And I took textiles for GCSE, and we were tasked with making a dress for an occasion. And I don't know what was going through my teenage brain, like, well, that could be said for a lot of my teenage years, I suppose.
We've all been there.
But yeah, but something compels me to want to make a wedding dress. And I remember my teacher's reaction was like, what? You're not doing that. You can't. You don't have the skills. There's no way you'll be able to do that. And I don't know, something about, I think, when you're a teenager, someone telling you can't do something, that makes you want to do it all the more.
It
So I
is
was like,
it is a rag to a raging bull. It's like
yeah,
okay, allow me to try and disprove you and try and now do it, even if I shall fail.
yeah. So I made a wedding dress. I did it, and I think I was so motivated to do it just because she told me that I couldn't. So I was like, watch me, you know. And yeah, so it had like a whole cape section because it was supposed to be inspired by nature, and I wanted it to be inspired by air, such that when a person walked, it would like get caught by the air and kind of like flow a little bit. And I also added like embroidery around the hem, just because I think part of that was in spite, just like you think I can't do it. Look, I've done it, and I'm gonna do it so well. I'm putting little flowers on it.
I mean, I feel like my entire career has been fueled by caffeine and spite, so, you know.
Yeah, I think that was setting me up well for the PhD.
Very much so. I mean, I've got to ask, like, what was the reception to it? What grade did you get? Like, did the teacher eat a slice of
Yeah.
humble pie with a side of wedding dress?
I wish I could tell the story and say that, you know, she was all like clapping her hands and so happy, but she was a bit of a battle axe, you know, as a and she was a bit grumpy. I mean, even before this incident, she was a bit grumpy. So she gave me a B, and I'm still bitter. That is B for bitter, you know, because yeah, I think it deserved an A.
I mean, you made a
Yeah,
freaking wedding dress. That's pretty impressive.
yeah, and it had a whole cape section, you know, and it like I used two different kinds of material, one that was like kind of see-through because it was meant to be based on air, and then one that was opaque, obviously. So it had like a short skirt that made out of the opaque material, and then this like translucent material over the top. So I made two skirts, so essentially two dresses that went inside each other to be worn together, and then a whole cape, and then a whole train with flowers.
I mean,
So yeah,
I'm a big fan of
you know.
suits, and I feel like not enough suits make use of capes. I feel like we should all go back to wearing capes.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like that's a thing that is only going to enhance one's wear.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, if it's your wedding day and you're getting all dressed up, you might as well like just, you know, rock it in a cape because, you know, it's meant to be your day where you're feeling fabulous. You might as well go whole hog and get a cape.
I mean, I want to feel fabulous on a Wednesday afternoon, let alone my wedding day.
Yeah.
I would legitimately just walk around the house in a cape if I had one.
Yeah, definitely, actually. Yeah. Yeah, maybe we should make capes part of like high street fashion. We'll bring them in.
If we know anyone that can make a successful TikTok, we'll skyrocket.
Yes, yes. The Gen Z will be the answer.
You
They'll
just
be the
need
ones that'll take it off.
one good
They'll
TikTok and
take
you're
off
away.
there. Yeah, make it go viral.
So, listeners, if any of you have a TikTok and you want to model a cape,
Make capes happen.
let's do hashtag make capes happen. There we go. Changing the world not only with research but with social moves as well.
Yeah, so changing the fashion world.
Have you? So obviously, like I think creative endeavors are great, and I love creative endeavors. But if you're anything like me, which you suggested you might be, I sort of cycle through hobbies. And I imagine you might do yourself. Have you sort of like read, played, listened to anything good recently? Watched even?
Yeah. Yeah, so I'm actually, not to sound like, I don't know, bougie or whatever, but I'm part of a book club.
That's not that bougie. That's not that bougie. People like to talk about books and such.
Yeah. Well, it's the first time I've been part of a book club, so quite exciting. And recently we read Travis Alabanza's None of the Above. So it's a memoir about Travis's life as someone who is trans. And I don't think it's necessarily a book that I would have picked up on my own, but honestly, like it's really well written, and I found it really insightful to like a different perspective than my own, and also like really humorous as well. So like it was really like an enjoyable read. And it really stuck with me, especially this one kind of story that Travis tells in the book, and I think it's around about the third chapter, about this cis man named Steve. So Steve has been battling for years with whether or not he can paint his nails and he's had like conversations in bed with his wife about whether or not he can paint his nails for like going on years. And Travis talks about how this is such a mundane thing, just painting your nails. Why is someone spending years and years of their like intimate bedroom time just talking about whether or not they feel like they have the agency, bringing it back to paint their nails. And this really stuck with me because I think it illustrates that kind of this need that we have in society to constrain people into these binary boxes of like man, woman, and then dictate kind of what behaviors you can do based on how you align with those boxes. That kind of thing can be damaging to all of us, even like people that identify as cis in the case of Steve. So yeah, I thought that was a really good book, and yeah, people should check it out if they're interested.
Yeah, I mean, if you've been on the show with me before, if you've listened to pretty much any content that I've done, I kind of fascinating. I find heteronormative kind of attitude so interesting because I remember in developmental psychology, sort of way back, it's 10 years now, but like talking about gender androgyny and how like the way it was framed back then was why can't boys play with dolls and girls play with tanks? So still operating in a binary, but like actually, if gender is a construct, if you kind of throw it out the window, and let people kind of do what they want, people might, I don't know, be happier. Combined with, being a cisgendered straight male, through life, you kind of definitely see the way, people are told to act. And yeah, something as simple as painting one's nails would be met with such critique and such responsiveness, which I think is really interesting, across sort of the spectrum, if you will. It's fascinating,
Mm-hmm.
and I just think like people are just so daft. Do you know what I mean? Like, just if everyone was just like, as long as you're not hurting yourself or others, you do you, boo. Love that. Like, just champion each other
Yeah,
instead. The world
absolutely.
would be so much nicer.
Yeah, absolutely. And what I found so interesting, like in addition about that story, is the way that his wife reacted when he did actually paint his nails. So when Steve painted his nails, his wife was not happy and actually spoke to Travis and said, like, you're the reason he's done this, and was quite angry. Um, and Travis described like what she was wearing to kind of like set the scene. And like, she was wearing trousers. And I just remember thinking, like, years and years ago, women wouldn't have been allowed to wear trousers. And, it's kind of like a double standard kind of. It's just the way that society and more importantly, societal norms can change over time. And yeah, we need to be a bit more kind of recognizing that, policing what other people do is ultimately damaging to all of us because it means that we all have restrictions put on our lives. And yeah, generally maybe it would be better if we all just stayed in our own lane.
Ah, if only
And
that were possible.
yeah.
Looking at you, cis, straight, white, able guys. I'm just saying. Just saying. Not to call anyone out, but just saying. That was an awful kind of noise. I have no idea what that was. Memo to edit that out. I'm not going to edit it out. I'm going to forget. But yeah, no, I think I don't know. I just love learning. I love trying to understand the world from different perspectives because I mean I know that mine is unique and so many elements bring that together. But I think that's good. I think it's a cool thing. Like I love learning different things, and even when I mean, even in the UK, different people from different places, like you've mentioned, like a village a few times and things like that. Like that
Mhm.
can have such a different culture and vibe and sense to it from say like someone like myself from Liverpool, and just things like that. And like I don't know, people are so quick to ready themselves with pitchforks as opposed to like a nice beverage of your choice and just a chat. You know.
Yeah, definitely. I think there's so much that we can learn from just hearing people out and recognizing that people will come from different backgrounds to us, and that's not necessarily something to be defensive about. That someone sharing their perspective isn't necessarily an attack on your perspective and your way that you see the world. So one of my favorite things to do when I was at uni is come home, not only for, like the free washing and the mum's cooking, but also just to leave what was like a bustling city life. Because I studied in Nottingham, which isn't the biggest city, but it still counts as like a city. And go back to my little hometown village and see the different kind of pace of life and how everything was a lot more relaxed and how like no one really cared. Like there is something quite nice about no one really caring about you know, oh, I have to submit this essay or whatever. Like no one really cares about the rush of research or the rush of everything. So I think, village life is very nice and it's nice to see. It's nice to kind of remind yourself that not everyone is so, career focused and rushing around all the time.
I mean, it's why Escape to the Country exists, am I right?
Yeah,
For international
definitely.
listeners, Escape to the Country is a little bit of a bougie program. I forget which station it's on. I think BBC. I'm not quite sure. Where quite often quite affluent people are like, I'm done with city life. I'm going to take my £500,000 home and go and retire to the countryside. And you sort of go with a little estate agent and look at houses. It's all very bougie, but it's quite you see some nice countryside.
Yeah.
But I think is that not this is just me chatting mints now, apologies. But does that not speak to sort of the broader and yeah, familiar listeners will get your bingo cards ready. Is that not a problem of the broader capitalistic system that we live in? Where like if you're in the city, well you've got to be research focused because it's the next thing, it's the next paycheck, it's you know what I mean? Like that kind of broader system pressure that maybe affects one's own agency. See, I can synergize.
Hmm.
As opposed to being like, oh well, actually, like let's sort of just take it easy because that's not as important. Like having that perspective and the metric, thinking of psychometrics that you measure your own success by, are actually maybe more important than what you actually do.
Yeah,
That wasn't a
definitely.
question. That was me just rambling. I apologize.
Yeah, well, I agree. I agree with the ramble. I think it was a great ramble. But yeah, absolutely. It's absolutely right. And I think that was what was so nice about coming home to my parents and my village, because, you kind of got, for right or wrong, you kind of got told this, like, your, especially during PhD, your productivity is, how many papers you can push out, and, all those lovely metrics that as researchers we're told to kind of grade ourselves against. Um, but then it was nice coming back home where nobody cared if you'd written a single word that week, like it didn't matter. Um, they much more cared about like almost like family values and like have you spent time with the grandkids kind of thing. And which was quite nice. It's nice to kind of
that
be
more, and
reminded.
I'm gonna say little c conservative values. You know, not a capital.
Yeah, but I guess more like the wholesomeness of like I guess it's also a little bit nostalgic, I suppose, of just yeah, like visiting your grandparents, um, who, they don't necessarily know what your job title is. They just know like, if I tell my nan that I'm a doctor, I'm pretty sure she thinks I'm performing like open heart surgery, like which is not what I do. Um,
No, tell her
yeah.
you're doing open brain surgery. At least it's the right part of the body. Am I right?
Yeah, we're close.
uh, yeah, no, it's fascinating. It's something that, like, I don't know. I feel like goes round my brain like trainers in a washing machine, if you will. And I think so. Let's take all this. Let's move on because I kind of maybe have a feeling that I know where your answer would go. But one of my favorite questions on the show is if you had no limitations, you had access to people, time, resource, to unlimited quantities. What's your one blue
Hmm.
sky idea?
That's quite a question. I mean, opening a dog cafe would be amazing, but that's probably not the answer that I'm supposed to give, is it?
Sign me up. I would, yes, sold.
Yeah, I mean, that would probably come with a lot of challenges in and of itself, but, I think that would be so much fun. I did once meet someone that wanted to open a cat cafe at, like, the bottom of the shop, and then the top of the shop be a board game cafe, which sounds a bit chaotic, but lots of fun.
I mean, the cats
Um,
would love it. There'd be so much for them to knock over.
yeah, exactly. Maybe you'd have to, like, keep them separate or let them run around and embrace the chaos, I don't know. But yeah, so speaking more, I was gonna say realistically, but in this scenario, anything's on the table. Yeah, I think I'd still be doing something similar to what I'm doing now. Ultimately because I do enjoy data science, working with numbers. I often feel they're a bit like Sudoku puzzles. So it's just like getting stuck in with a problem and trying to find the answer. So that's something that I do enjoy. And I think that if I can do that whilst also having a positive impact on the world and on people and their mental health, then I think I will be a happy bean. So, yeah, I think I'd still probably be doing what I'm doing now.
Would you sort of see that as like running like a sort of, for lack of a better term, a kind of master project of, a lifelong longitudinal study? Would it be like, you set up, I don't know, like a consultancy kind of business, and you have people that like and trust to do work? Like, what does it look like? What does it feel like?
Mhm. Yeah, so I think something longitudinal would be great because you do get a richer data set that way by following. So if we're talking about students, for example, so following them throughout their um, career in academia, so like throughout their course. Also, I think it would definitely be a national project because, like, what I'm finding in my role, when I was trying to publicize this longitudinal survey that we're doing at the minute, I get quite a bit of pushback from universities that I speak to because they want to run their own survey, which is all well and good. But then we get lots of pockets of information where they all ask different questions, they all ask it in a different way, and it's all done on only one institution. And that's not really useful if we're actually wanting to work out what makes a difference for students across the board. So,
And if I were to put my cynical hat on, which
mhm,
very very seldom comes off, I would hazard a guess that that is by and large because universities know that that type of data is valuable to them. Right, the university that
mhm,
cracks student loneliness will then seek to be a very rich university because their students won't feel lonely, and as we
mhm.
discussed, they'll have a much better time. Right, and I feel like that again is really not in the nature of research. Research should be collaborative. If we had a national
Yeah,
project, as you suggest, we'd probably not only find
mhm.
answers quicker, but be able to help a lot more people.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's where kind of competition and capitalism can come in the way of doing actual good and open science and all these kind of new buzzwords that we're all working to. And it's kind of funny because, when we reach out to these universities, we're offering to do what they're, paying people to do, but for free. So like we're offering to share anonymized data, like a data set with them. So they'll be able to see where their university kind of ranks compares to other universities. They won't be able to identify the other specific universities, but it'll give them a good idea. And so essentially, we're doing what they're planning to do themselves, but for free. So they won't have to pay an in house researcher. So yeah, it just feels a bit silly that they're pushing back. Like, I understand why they are, kind of like from their perspective, but yeah, I don't think it's what we need in order to move science forward and this research field forward, because student mental health is still an area that is rapidly developing. And yeah, I think in order to really move forward, we're going to have to get the universities to collaborate a bit more.
And again, that overlaps with my work. I want to see like if video games can help reduce that stigmatization and open up discussion about mental health. And a
Mm-hmm.
colleague of mine, Hope, she's working on like access to student mental health services. and things like that online, and looking at the way digital impact can be used to help provide access and things like that. So there's such a need for it. Student mental health is, as I always like to put it, is in the toilet, and we really should
Hmm.
try and sort that out as soon as possible, because ultimately
Yeah.
these horrifically burned out like experiencing mental health challenges students are going to be our next workforce, and then you wonder why people are chronically burnt out and experiencing mental health challenges for a much longer period. It's not so much chicken as egg as very much obvious progression of humans, but this is all very, very grim and very grey, and we should be focusing on the good things, like people like yourself actually doing this research that is seeking to try and make change. And I think it's the stepping stone, right? You do this, you publish it, people pick it up. That then can be used to perpetuate more research of that, and we get that fixed term contract a little bit more permanent every time. You
Yeah,
know,
that's the goal.
um, yeah. Sorry, yeah. I always feel like I end up sounding so grumpy, but I get very impassioned about trying to make change, and that subsequently
Yeah.
makes you sound grumpy when you're also an old man. That happens.
We're not
Um,
that old yet.
I feel it. Let me tell you, I feel it. So you mentioned your personal tutor at the top of the show,
Hmm.
and I'm curious. I'm almost gonna veto them just because I like to challenge my guests a little bit. Um, is there anyone that you'd like to give a shout out to, who you think has been very like impactful or meaningful to your sort of career journey, life, even? Um, just to really give a chance for them to receive a little bit of spotlight, a little bit of love.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, if I was to mention everyone, I think we might be here all day because, like, I've had the pleasure of working with so many amazing people. We're kind of told that academia is, well, it is very, very, very competitive. Um, and everyone's kind of out to make, we're told everyone's out to kind of publicize their own name, and it's, this hyper competitive space. And to some respects it is, but I've been so like overjoyed with the amount of support that I've received, especially moving into this new role where I'm doing a lot of things that I'd never done before. So like psychometric scale development, which is like where you make essentially like a questionnaire to measure something like, for example, belonging.
I want to point out
So
for
I'd
listeners'
never.
benefit, it is far more complicated than that, and you've got to make sure that it's measuring what you want it to measure and internal validity and other science words. But it's not. It's not. You're doing yourself a disservice by making it sound that easy.
Yeah, there's lots of stats behind it, but yeah, essentially. But that was all new to me, because as I say, I came during my PhD, I came from the world of like behavioral experiments. So totally different ballpark. Um, and I've been met with so many like supportive people that are willing to like, give me an hour of their time just to walk me through how to do something in R, so like a computer programming language, and even willing to like share their code, which yeah, I couldn't have imagined anyone doing that at PhD. Like I wrote pretty much all my own code. Um, I was humbled by how like, yeah, how supportive people have been in helping you kind of get started as an early career researcher. I thought there'd be a lot more like, you know, people kind of out for themselves, because that's kind of what you're told when you start your research journey. I don't know if it's people trying to warn you about academia and how competitive it can be, but so far it's not always been the case. There have been a few, I suppose, but mostly everyone's been very, very inspirational, you know. Um, in just wanting to be so supportive. And it's made me want to be supportive of other people too, if I do have any skills that I can teach someone. I've already taught someone what I've learned about psychometric scale development. So flip the script and given something back to someone else. And I think that's honestly what we should be doing as scientists, kind of sharing knowledge and not trying to keep it for ourselves, because that's going to make us more employable. Like, I mean, that's kind of, I think I'd be sad if that was my attitude to life, you know. being quite restrictive in like what I know and what I can do. I think things are much more happier when you do talk to people and you do share your findings and your knowledge.
No, I think that's really really important. It's something I'm very passionate about myself. I think I very much resonate with what you've said, and I was very lucky to kind of meet like the people doing game studies. You know, there's not that many certainly that are in sort of like more senior level sort of positions, and it was humbling to be sort of like welcomed in by those people
Mm-hmm.
and included and given opportunities. You know, and that all stems from like having an open attitude and being willing to get involved in meeting these people. But also the most important thing is to then reach back down and lift someone else up. You know, don't just stay
Yes.
on that plinth, um, and give back. And I think that's you know really really important and something that I certainly advocate for myself. Like you'll only be lonely
Mm-hmm.
at the top if you don't bring anyone else there with you. Do you know what I mean?
That's so true. Yeah, and I've mentioned that I'm already a personal tutor, and that was mainly like a big inspiration for that. So wanting to help other people navigate studying in academia. So, because I remember it being a very high pressure struggle going through my own undergrad. So, wanting to help people navigate that journey and know that they're not, alone, and there are skills and resources and support out there um, to help them get through it. Um, and previously and currently, I'm also part of Women into STEM initiatives, so mentoring young women to help them see that STEM is an option and there are, as I say, skills and support resources out there to help them get where they need to be.
STEM
So,
is unfortunately a very cis straight white able guy profession. We need more
mhm,
marginalized people in science. I mean, there's that old joke that psychology is typically done by white people for white people on white people with white people
yeah,
sort of thing. You
mhm,
know, like that. There is a lack of sort of diversity when it comes to studies because we're talking shop again. Apologies, but we talk about this whole replication and how valid are these and effect sizes. But if like your entire population is white, can we
mhm.
really generalize when you allow for those broader sociological differences? You know.
Yeah, definitely. And I said that I kind of started my research career, so like during the PhD, with kind of like a positivist perspective. So for anyone that doesn't know, that's kind of trying to make psychology a bit like physics. So a tree is still a tree when we observe it, regardless of whether or not we call it a tree. Psychology sometimes tries to do the same thing. And by saying, like, if we're observing, I don't know, someone's anxiety, that anxiety is going to be the same regardless of the fact that we're observing it. Um, and I think we can't necessarily do that because, as I said before, people don't exist in vacuums. The fact that you're observing someone and you're coming in as a researcher with your own kind of assumptions and values that will affect how you approach researching certain issues and how the participant responds to whatever measurement kind of tool or way that you're speaking to them. So I think it's something that we need to be mindful of, like are our experiences influencing what we're learning about, and also how does the context matter? So the specific kind of like way that the person is presenting whatever we're measuring, how do their experiences then interact with that? So I'm primarily a quantitative researcher, and I'm becoming more and more mindful that the numbers don't always tell the full story. And really, when you're in a mental health space, particularly, you do need that qual. So the words, if people don't know, like quantitative, qualitative. So numbers are great, but sometimes you need like someone's actual experience. So just to sit them down and ask them, what does this actually mean for you? What does this look like?
I was just about to say, and apologise for sounding like a contrarian, to be like, oh, which is why we need qualitative research, because
Yeah.
it helps add a lot of that context, and it's not faultless. The way that is analysed, you still suffer a lot from the same research biases, and if you're analyzing it, you're looking for things that other people might not notice or will notice and things. So, we're in. I think we're in a good space for science. I think the boom of open science and people like yourself and other people that are sort of getting their accreditation, these past few years and going into their careers, the cis straight white able guys can't live forever. They will retire eventually, and that means someone new will get to step into the fold, and that will hopefully promote change throughout the academic system, which I think will only benefit the students studying at unis. I think my favorite memories of teaching were when like you could see that people couldn't get it, and you were like, okay, let me explain it this way, and you would see their brain go, oh, now I get it. That was that's truly incredible, and I think we need those broader, diverse people engaged at every level.
Yeah, definitely.
So to round off, then one of my sort of like final sort of questions to get into is: you're going to a biodome of your choice for a little bit of rest and relaxation, no work, and you can take with you one of the following. So you can take a book, an album, a TV/film box set, singular, whatever, and a game of any sort. If it comes as a collection, I'll let you have that. I'm not, it's not too restrictive. But where are you going and what are you taking?
Oh gosh. I'm torn between, so where am I going? So I'm torn between like, so I'm assuming I have like electricity isn't a problem.
Oh,
I suppose
everything
that's the
everything
first
will
question.
work. You will have all of the amenities that
Okay,
you need.
we're
It's
in fantasy land.
basically you're putting a fully functional and sustainable cabin in any biodome of your choice.
Nice, nice. Um, See, I was gonna say like a forest because I really like walking in like National Trust, parks and nature reserves. But I think at night that could be suddenly like you're in a horror like in a horror film. So maybe I'll go basic and say like a nice beach, a nice secluded beach. Somewhere warm, essentially, I say, as it's like just been raining here and it's all grey and horrible, as is England most of the
Can we
time.
can we just talk about British weather at the moment? I mean, obviously we're recording this ahead of when it goes out, but like, what happened to autumn? It was like 20 the other weekend. Then it dropped down. It was like
Hmm.
11 with like lows of 5. Then it's gone back up again to like 15. Can we just what like climate
Yeah,
change?
it doesn't
Hello.
know what it's doing.
Like what I want to get my cardigans out. I want to stay snuggly and warm, and then no, got to get the shorts back on because it's roasting outside again.
Yeah, it's so confusing. Yeah. So yeah, somewhere with more consistent warm weather, probably.
Love that.
Maybe by the sea as well, because I think it's like quite relaxing listening to the ocean as well. So anywhere that fits that description with like not many people around, like no one can harm my like my
It's your
quiet space.
your space.
Um, I mean, you mentioned like a box set. I mean, I always go back to Parks and Rec. Like if you
Oh,
haven't seen Parks and Recreation, that is a comfort show, always guaranteed to like make me laugh. It's probably that. If we're talking film, then like I always love Spirited Away.
oh,
And any like
excellent.
yeah, any like Studio Ghibli film really, but yeah. Um I'd probably bring my phone with like Spotify and like all of my playlists, but I suppose if I were to like narrow it down, my comfort band is always Fall Out Boy. So like and it has been since I was a teenager. So maybe like do I have to like narrow it down to an album or can I just take my whole like
I mean, if I
Spotify?
was if I was being pedantic, there is a collection of all the albums on vinyl, so you technically have access to all of them. I'd
That is
give
a
you that.
good loophole.
If it's sold as one box set, I'm willing to give it to you. So,
Yeah,
do you
awesome.
do you have a favorite Fall Out Boy album? I mean, I'm literally wearing a Fall Out Boy hoodie as we speak. Familiar listeners will know I'm
I'm
a huge
so
fan of the band.
jealous. Yeah, so we could have a whole extra podcast episode talking about my opinions of all the Fall Out Boy albums.
I mean, we could
But I
like a
think
little Psyched to Be With You is its own sub series. We can make it happen.
yeah. Yeah, that would be awesome. Um So if I were to narrow it down, and I've been asked before, so I think I have to give it to Folia Jew just because the lyrics are so like creative and it is kind of edgy a lot of the time. But and I think there's so many bangers in there that like it just wins out over like, like Infinite on High is very good as well, but it's yeah, I think Folia Jew just tips it for me. So yep. I'm
Excellent.
gonna listen to my emo music on the beach.
I mean, sounds wonderful. You know.
Yeah.
Do you have any opinion on the
Um,
latest album? Came out this
yeah,
year.
so I haven't okay, so no one hate me, but I haven't really liked a lot of their post hiatus stuff. I preferred more of like the pre-hiatus stuff, but this new album's pretty good. I wasn't totally sold at first, and I think that's because I was clinging on to the pre-hiatus stuff. And I was still a bit grumpy. But no, I like this one. This one's good. It made it into my Spotify favorites playlist.
Yeah, I'm inclined to. I mean, I think Save Rock and Roll was very like picked up where they left off with like very good production, good features. ABAP
Hmm.
and Mania definitely had that more like electronic feel, and I think they were very aware of that. Like, because they like to have
Yeah.
like a gimmick for each album, right? It's like ABAP is just like
Hmm.
samples, like they have like the Munster theme tune in one of them, things like
Hmm.
that. Like Mania was what it was. They tried something new,
Yeah.
couple of bangers on there. I think they realised that didn't necessarily work, and I feel like this, so much for Stardust, there's a much more of a return to form. I think it captures a lot of what
Yeah,
made the old stuff great.
definitely. And I think that's why I liked it so much because it was quite similar to the stuff that I really liked pre-hiatus. Yeah, and as someone that usually leans more towards like rock and metal, um, aside from like, Fall Out Boy, I didn't really like Mania, I think because it was like electronic and that's not really my vibe. But yeah, I like the new album and I hope they kind of continue going in this direction.
Yeah. And a game.
Yeah, so gosh, a game. I definitely take a game, that's for sure. But narrowing it down is quite difficult. Um, if I'm gonna be on a deserted island where it's only me, I think I'm gonna take New Horizons, Animal Crossing, and just like, when I'm not sat on the beach, I'll be sat on the fake beach with my animal friends and just having a great time.
People seem to really take it one of two ways and either go, I can play this forever, or I can replay this
Mhm.
forever, or I haven't finished this yet and I want to. They're the three kind of lanes
Mhm.
people go for. Animal Crossing is a solid shout though, very good.
Yeah, and it's kind of nostalgic for me as well because I played Wild World back in the day, which was like, gosh, it came out for the DS when I was like in primary school, I think, all those years ago.
I mean, let me
Um,
let me move my walking stick, but I actually played the original Animal Crossings on GameCube
oh
when it
wow.
would take up a whole memory card just to save your game.
We've come a long way.
We have come a long way. We have come. I mean, DLC. Wow, download content
Mhm.
like additional stuff. You can farm on it. I played it like during 2020. I was alternating between that and Final Fantasy VII Remake. Put 100 hours into it. Got a 5-star island and just went right. I'm done because there was too many games in the backlog.
Mhm.
So I haven't actually picked it up like post DLC. Like I don't think I've ever done any of the swimming.
Mm.
And it's like I know it's there
Yeah,
to go back to, but by the time I want to go back to it, there'll probably be another one.
yeah. You see, I think it's partly the nostalgia that keeps making me pick it up every so many weeks because like I have the same villagers that I had when I was a kid. And
Oh,
that's like I didn't pick them to be. They just like they showed up on my island and I was like, "Oh my gosh." And it was like an old friend. So I feel a bit bad because they kind of guilt you when you don't go on it for a while. Like, where have you been? Oh no. So I try and check in. It only takes about 20 minutes to, say hi to everyone. And it's like it's a nice little like almost mental health break as well. Just checking in with some old pals, I suppose.
no, that sounds great. So just to reiterate, we'll go back through those. Um, so TV show, you'd go Parks and Rec / Spirited Away.
Mhm.
Parks and Rec,
Yeah.
big fan of the Mike Shuraverse, big fan of that as a whole. So okay, cool. Fall Out Boy CD collection will give you all the albums. I'm happy with that.
Mm-hmm.
Animal Crossing New Horizons, solid shout. And then a book.
Mm-hmm.
Take anything to read?
Yeah, so I've already read this book, and I read it before it got picked up by Amazon and made into like a TV series. But I really enjoyed Good Omens. It's a really good book. I mean, I like anything by Terry Pratchett, so yeah, so it's written by Terry Pratchett and Neil Gaiman working together. And it was really fun. I think I like anything a little bit fantasy and a little bit wacky, a little bit out of the box. So yeah,
The
I'd
TV show
recommend.
stars David Tennant, right?
It does, yeah.
Big fan of David Tennant.
Yeah,
How can you not like him?
yeah, absolutely. I haven't really kept up with the TV show though. But yeah, I'm wondering how they continued on after the book though, because obviously there was only one book that was written like years and years and years ago. But
In
yeah,
my sincere experience, a lot of the time when they start deviating from the source material, you do notice a decline in quality.
that was my worry as
Seeing
well,
that
and maybe why
happen
I
with
haven't checked in.
seeing that with like Handmaid's Tale, you knew as soon as they stopped following the book material. Oof.
Do not say that name to me. I had to, so I know everyone loves Handmaid's Tale, and like I agree, like amazing way of looking at like important issues, important themes. But I had to study that book at GCSE for 4 years. So it's almost like a like a trigger thing, like, oh no, can't hear that name again.
I think
So I
for me personally, I think it's a bit overrated. I quite like Margaret
mm,
Atwood, but like the Mad Adam trilogy, Oryx and Crake,
mm,
vastly superior in my opinion. If you like your dystopia, um, that's me.
yeah,
Come for
I
me in the
mean,
YouTube comments. You know.
I feel like I almost can't have an objective opinion on Handmaid's Tale after having to like read it for 4 years. And our teacher, we had this one teacher that would keep forgetting what chapter we were on. So for like about 4 weeks, we kept going over the same chapter, and she wouldn't agree. Like she wouldn't hear us out when we told her that we'd already read this.
And like
So
I like sci-fi dystopia as much as the next person, but like rereading and rereading Handmaid's Tale is in of itself a type of Orwellian dystopia. Like
yeah, it really was. So I have like I guess a bit of trauma to it whenever someone brings it up and like, oh, have you seen the series? It's like I physically can't.
very much drops off after they leave the books behind, and you very much tell when it is. So I mean,
Yeah, that tends to happen.
how did Good Omens stack up to the book? Were you being a fan of it?
Yeah, so yeah, they did a pretty good job. Yeah, I mean, I think I preferred the book, but I mean, David Tennant always does a great job. So, mhm.
Okay, well, I mean, it's okay to like both. Do you know what I mean? Like
Yeah,
the book
yeah,
generally is better. I found that with like things like The Witcher, you know, like it
mhm,
generally tends to be the way. Um, you know, things like Game of Thrones as well. The books I think much more enjoyable, purely because
mhm.
you just get a lot more context, and you'll find that context is really quite necessary when significant plot points happen.
Yeah, definitely. You can get a lot more extra detail in a book and kind of have longer to process certain things and have a think about it. And and yeah, and get more involved in the world as well
I
than when you're
mean,
watching something, I
you
think.
know, looking at you, Tolkien, we don't need 3 pages describing a tree. Not quite, but
Yeah, it
I
can
get.
go a bit too much the other way.
Um, okay, so that's sort of all of my usual listed questions. I like to ask before we sort of round out the episode. Do you have any questions for me? I've been asked the biodome question and how my PhD is going several times, so please don't ask those. As I'm sure you'll appreciate
Yeah,
you don't ask a PhD person how their research is going or when they're due to finish.
never, never. Yeah, so I think I want to know if you could invite anyone onto your podcast, like any podcast guest, who would it be and why?
That's a good one. You know, I've had a few like I've asked before. Like I've always said, someone like B. Dave Walters, TTRPG performer, would be great. I'd also love to sit down and chat with someone like Stephen Fry. That would be a great conversation to have. Um, Matt Mercer as well, from Critical Role, obviously recently announced as the voice of Vincent Valentine in Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. So I think, people like that. I think in a weird way, I almost like, I don't know, I wouldn't want to have like a massive like superstar celebrity. I think I would struggle to keep up my form as a host, if
Hmm.
that makes sense. Like Jurgen Klopp or someone. I feel like I wouldn't know what to say. I would ruin the episode myself. Not to put a mark against the other people that I named, but I just think like I feel like I would be in awe of them to a degree that I could still make the episode happen. Which is
Yeah.
probably, it's a bit of a weak handshake of an answer, I guess.
No, no, it makes sense. I'm just imagining like those big name people's like PR team, like, about to click send on the email to like invite them on the podcast to be like, oh, never mind. He said he doesn't want to speak to big name celebrity.
I mean, I would be willing to take on the challenge.
Yeah.
And I think one of the things there's a whole bunch of podcasts that you can choose to listen to, and what I try and capture with mine is not just talking about what you do, but why you do it, what got you there, what is
Mhm.
it that motivates you, what keeps you going. And I feel like generally speaking, those are the kind of notes that come out. And I think it would be cool to find out how those people kind of tick and what keeps them motivated, you know. But I also find that, like, even with all the people I've named, they've done several interviews and podcasts before. You probably can drift through that information through various sources. But obviously, I also like tooting my own horn and speaking to them as well.
Mhm.
There we go. Um, yes, that is my answer. Several people that I would probably never get on the show.
Never say never. You never know.
You never know. It's like if you played Degrees of Separation, you could maybe make it happen. Do you know what I mean? But
Mhm.
I try and be amenable to work around my guests and just have a nice chat. I'm saying this on my
Yeah.
own show as if like if you've listened to 5 minutes of the show, you wouldn't know this anyway. Anywho, as we wrap up, where is it best for guests to find you? All the links will be attached to if you found this episode, but where shall people go to follow you, your journey, your work, etc.?
Yep, the best place to find me is on Twitter or X or whatever Elon calls it nowadays. And my Twitter handle is Hannah R. Slack. I think it's below me on the screen
On the
if
video,
you're
yeah.
if you're watching. Yeah. Um, and if you want to keep up with the work that I'm doing at the minute on the You Belong project, so looking at student loneliness in the transition to starting university, you can also follow the You Belong project on Twitter. So that's its handle, just You Belong project, because we'll be posting updates there as well.
Lovely. Anything else you'd like to say before we wrap up?
Just thanks for having me. Thanks for speaking to me for this time. I've thoroughly enjoyed it. And yeah.
Well, I'm pleased. Thank you very much for joining me. I appreciate it. All that remains for me to do for listeners and viewers alike is just say thank you for listening. As we always say on this show, look after your mind, body, and soul. And I'll see you again next time. Until then, bye bye.